Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Big shout out to the supporters of this podcast, whether you support via the CashApp, Vegas World INC 77, I think that's what it is, but it's on the screen on YouTube. But also those who have supported the podcast in the past via patreon.com, which I had to put on pause for the time being. Just way too much maintenance trying to send things over there, and we just have to grow the audience in order to get to a point where we can have an active and robust Patreon audience to support, the things that are being done right here on this podcast, like the production of the YouTube version of Hip Hop Now podcast. And if you don't know, maybe you've been listening to the audio version for a very long time, and you like, oh, there's a video version. Yes, there is. There's been one for almost a year now. Quick backstory: at one point I was going to end the podcast, to be honest, because I've been doing it for a while, and the 50th year of hip hop was 2023, and I was like, what? Like, I can't end it. But I decided, I was like, you know what? Let me just make the video version that some people have been asking for the entire time. So I did that. The channel started out. The channel was always around, but as far as Hip Hop Now podcast, the weekly show, the audience was kind of like around 50, 60, went up to like 100 to 200 subscribers. Then we kind of made a push recently to 500, hit 500, and now we are at 700 plus subscribers on YouTube. So I want to thank everybody who hit that subscribe button. But please know, the majority of the people who watch my videos, whether it be long form or shorts, do not subscribe. Now, it is your prerogative if you don't want to subscribe to the channel, but if you enjoy the content and you want to see more, subscribing is the best way to send that kind of a message, as well as hitting the like button. Content that we've had on the channel recently, like I did the interview with Marcus J. Moore, who is the author of the now controversial De La Soul book, that I think you should watch the interview. I'm not trying to sway anybody. I'm not trying to say go against your hip hop favorites because they told you or whatever. They did say is your prerogative. If you want to purchase the book or read the book, I suggest you watch my interview with the author to get real insight into his intentions. And then if you really not that sold, but you need more, I mean, you can, we all have phones, right? You can go to your favorite book app, whether that be Kindle or iBooks or whatever, and just get the sample and just read some of it. And if it doesn't sound like what you want or you're still not into it, just like with any other product out there that is there for purchase, at least, you just make that decision on whether you want to read it or not. But also on the channel, Kendrick dropped an album. I did a quick reaction, but then I did a full-on reaction review kind of breakdown, just a little bit, nothing crazy, right here on the channel of Kendrick Lamar's new album, GNX. So check that out. So there's a lot of content. And today we have some really, really, really dope things to talk about. Like if you're a music head, if you're a hip hop head, right? Hold on, my watch going crazy. You have like been collecting hip hop forever, how long, or however old you are, right? Like I'm a cat who was born in the 70s, late 70s, but it doesn't mean I don't own like Stevie Wonder's classic albums, because I did the knowledge on the music in that time where I wasn't born yet. And I made my connections with the music just based off of my listening, right? So I feel like with hip hop, it's the same thing. If you're younger, maybe you discovered like why people love 90s hip hop so much or 80s hip hop. And maybe you went down that rabbit hole of building your collection. If you're my age or in and around that time and you love music, you've been building it forever. One of the things that, at least back in the days, used to drive us crazy as hip hop heads is like shelved albums, right? Albums that was like, yo, we heard rumors, there was interviews, there's all kinds of breadcrumbs to a new album from this artist, and it never dropped or it got shelved, right? And unreleased. Sometimes in recent years, we're able to get that music, like, right? Large Professor said the LP, buy the album when I drop it, and it never dropped until years later. So the LP that Large Professor talked about on Tribe Called Quest's Midnight Marauders is available for you to listen today, which is dope. But back then, it was frustrating because it was like, where is it? And at that point, we were like, it never came out. Foxy Brown talked about Il Nana 2, and I'm not big on sequels, but Il Nana 2, when I had the bootleg, was like crazy. And I was like, man, this album never really came out until it did. Same thing with Rod Digger, with her follow up to Dirty Harry. So there's a history of highly anticipated unreleased hip hop albums that either never released or eventually were released in some shape or form. And some of them you can listen to on streaming services. But what we're doing here is something a little bit different, because when Nas dropped I Am and I Am Nostradamus, right? Or Nostradamus, I should say. Originally, that album was supposed to be a double album, and it was very different. There were a number of songs that were on the bootleg version of that album that wound up either a few hitting Nas's I Am album, and really one, which is Project Window, hitting the Nostradamus album. And then there was a bunch of songs that were on that bootleg that just never saw the light of day, right? So Nas put out this album called The Lost Tapes. This was probably somewhere in between Nostradamus, Stillmatic, Godson area, like right around those. Well, let's put it this way: I Am Nostradamus, and then there's the hold on, we got sounds popping off on the phone. My bad. Uh, even though I don't know where they came from, whatever the case. So we basically had these leftovers and songs that got replaced because of bootlegging that were now on this album called The Lost Tapes, right? And it features songs like Blaze of 50, Black Zombie, Do Rag, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's Original. And the tape was so dope to people of this unreleased Nas music, this, on the cutting floor kind of Nas music that, like, yo, it's never going on an album, but they're too good to just leave, in some studio on somebody's hard drive or whatever. So let's put it in the form of this album called The Lost Tapes. And most people consider it a classic. Some people, I saw one post on Reddit from a couple years ago where a dude said it's Nas's second best album in his catalog. Now, I don't know about that, but if you want to talk about Nas classics, you can call it a classic and I won't fight you, because it really was that. Like, we were playing it like it was an album. And something like this happened in the past with Earth, Wind, and Fire's first greatest hits, which is, you heard those songs before. But I think at that point, I don't know if like they had a bunch of fans that knew their albums. So when they dropped this greatest hits, it kind of put people on to how great they were and probably went back and listened to the albums. But the greatest hits album was so popular that it literally was like one of their best albums, even though the songs appeared on other albums. So This is somewhat like that, but more like lost tapes, more like songs that you heard on mixtapes, you heard snippets of, all kinds of things like that that never really either landed on an album or landed later as a part of a deluxe or whatever. But these are 5 artists who had lost tapes like albums in their catalog that you can go and listen to right now. Now, I'm not saying these are better on the same level, but I think if you like the artists and maybe you heard songs here and there and wondered, yo, what happened to that joint? What happened to this one? They're available. They're just on their version of lost tapes. So let's start right at the top. Mob Deep, Free Agents. This is a album, almost like a double album. It's a lot of songs on here, but this is an album that featured a ton of Mob Deep records that I believe was supposed to be on a couple of Mob Deep albums, but they just didn't work out. So they wound up being albums they had. When they got out of their deal, I believe, with Loud Records, and right before they went and signed with G Unit, right? Free Agents dropped. And I remember, like, I thought it was just like some made up bootleg thing because I was like, what is this? Free Agents? This sound like somebody just took, some freestyles off a mixtape and some loose songs off of mixtapes and put it together. But nah, this is official. You can go and listen to this right now. Uh, some of the standout tracks, we're just going to do 3 per album. But on here, Paid in Full, What Can I Do? And It's Over, giving you that Mob Deep vibe and style. And throughout the project, you could tell which version of Prodigy you getting by just listening to them, right? They even have a like Survival of the Fittest. I think it's 2003. So it's like a updated with new verses basically at that time. So that was a very dope album. The next one I have up is fairly recently in comparison, but it's Kendrick Lamar's Untitled Unmastered. The crazy part about this is Kendrick performed 1 or 2 of the, or even 3 of these songs building up to, I believe, Pimp a Butterfly, right? Or during one or right after, one or the other. But I think some of them were heard right before To Pimp a Butterfly, also Damn, like right in the middle of those joints. And it can hold its own like an album. I know some people who rank this joint pretty high when they're ranking Kendrick Lamar albums. And it's because, man, it was like when you saw him perform some of these records and the standout records, honestly, it feels weird to even say the 3, but I'm going to say them. But they're not really going to do anything unless you go and press play because the standouts are Untitled 1, Untitled 6, and Untitled 7. They don't necessarily have names beyond the fact that they're untitled. But to me, those were the standout records. But, watching him perform, this song and you're captivated by the performance and he got an album coming or, an album just dropped and you're like, damn, why this ain't on there? Maybe it's on the next album. Then the next album drops and it's not there because it was on this Untitled Unmastered. And I think it's a very dope lost tapes for Kendrick that some people either forgot about or never realized this existed. So next one up, Ghostface Killer Hidden Darts Special Edition. This one is dear to my heart. You know why? Because it contains some records that were supposed to be featured on I was going to say Incarcerated Scarfaces, Supreme Clientele, and then what's the other one where he cooking like a huge grilled cheese or, or whatever that is. Hold up, I'm blanking right now. Let's just go and look because honestly, that's the easiest way to get past it. Bulletproof Wallets. Why? I didn't even have to look. It just came to my mind. Bulletproof Wallets was the follow-up, Ghostface's 3rd album, but the follow-up to Supreme Clientele. And I remember having the bootleg that contained not only the records that were released, but also the records that didn't make the album. And at that time, it was kind of like a screw up with Sony because, like, in some cases, if me and you bought the same album, the track listing on the back was different. And in some cases, it was different songs. And for me, I was just heated because the bootleg was like the complete version. If that version would have released, Ghostface, most people would have been like, yo, Ghostface got three class solo classics in a row. But Sony botched it. But this Hidden Darks special edition contains three of those songs that was originally on Bulletproof Wallets. One being The Watch, featuring Raekwon, The Sun, that also features Slick Rick, and Good Times, which also features Raekwon. I don't know if Raekwon was on the original, I heard, but he's on this version. Yes, Good Times. They sampled a Good Times beat, and Ghostface kills it. Uh, but there's more than just this on there. It's a bunch of like the Odd Couple with Capadonna's on here. So it's basically almost like lost tapes material, but also a couple of Lucy's that appeared, around, but never really on a Ghostface album. Very dope. If you in the Ghostface and you've never heard of this, Merry Christmas. Bars. Two more to go. MOP, Marksman Cinema. Standout tracks on here, Half and Half, which I believe features Gangstar, The Money Got Lost, and Here Today, Gone Tomorrow. This is literally like a double album, and it's a similar situation that Mobb Deep had, like being in between deals. I think this was in between MOP's Rockefeller deal and their deal with G Unit. Or maybe this was a lot of G Unit stuff, but it was like in CD form, it was two CDs. So it's like an MOP double album of songs that didn't make any albums for MOP. You know what I'm saying? I think maybe towards the tail end, there's some, I guess, like greatest hits, like Cold as Ice is on there and Rugged Never Smooth. But the majority of this double album is records at the time, most people never heard of. I know I did. I thought this was like a mixtape, that might have had a couple of Lucy's here and there, but also contained songs we heard, until I heard it. And I was like, man, like it's like 15 joints on here. It's almost like 19 joints that I had never heard until that point. So if you're a fan of MOP and their style of music and you never heard of Marksman Cinema, go ahead and do it. Take the deep dive. It's on music streaming platforms, so you don't got to go search the internet for it. You can just go press play and listen. And the last joint I got up is one lost tape, so to speak, that's very near and dear to my heart. Quick story, if you don't mind. But I remember I was going on a college tour to Syracuse because my guidance counselor in high school, she knew I wanted to go to a HBCU, but she was like, go up there. I know you mentioned before that, you Syracuse was probably a school you would want to go to. I could get you some scholarships because you're local and and help with the cost, and it's a great school and all this stuff. And even though by that time I was like sold on going to a HBCU, I went because it was the school I was looking at before I had changed my mind. And I remember we took a bus ride up there, and it was dumb cold. It snowed and all of that. It's part of the reason why I didn't go, because I was like, hey man, I'm from New York. I'm used to it being cold, but it's too cold. It's too damn cold. Uh, but the one album that I was playing to death because I had just bought it was Ice Cube's Bootlegs and B-Sides. Standout records on here is What Can I Do remix. I think Mac 10 is on that joint. 24 with an L, which didn't appear on no Ice Cube album. It was crazy. And Check Yourself remix with Das Effects, which I don't believe was on the Predator album at the time. And I think this was the way you get it, or the way I got it through buying this. I played this tape to death, y'all. And this tape is more so some unreleased joints, some Lucy's, well, unreleased Lucy's, whatever. But unreleased songs, some remixes that didn't appear on any albums, as you can see, like how we do it in Today Was a Good Day. There's a remix of that on there. And they appeared on singles. Back in the days they had, if Check Yourself was out, you go buy the single cassette or CD or whatever, and it would have the instrumental, but it would also contain like the remix and the remix instrumental or multiple remixes. But this was a project that, if at the time, Ice Cube's 4 solo albums came out, and you knew there were records that you heard before, but they never really appeared anywhere where you could just buy the new album and it's there. This was a way to like add to your collection. And for me, like when I say I played it the whole weekend, like the whole weekend up there in Syracuse, it was just on repeat, just listening, over, like learning the lyrics, all of that. So there you have it, man. That's 5 lost tapes, like albums from other hip hop artists not named Nas. Do you know some that I don't? Because please put me on, because I'm the type who like to go and deep dive. There's some other ones that exist, but I think as complete projects, they're not that strong. They have like 1 or 2 joints, like Petey Crack has a joint called Crack Files Volume 1, but to me, there's a lot more skips on there, and then the songs that are hot are really hot. But these 5 are almost like getting new albums or getting a version of a song that you're like, man, I got all his albums, but that one joint I heard or the video version I saw was never on the album. These are albums where you could just go lock in and get them all, especially that Ghostface joint. Like Ghostface joint is solid from beginning to end. So leave your comments in the comment section below. Subscribe to the podcast if you like what you're hearing and seeing and you like this kind of content. Hit the like button, but more importantly, share it with people would enjoy this kind of content. You can follow me on social media. My tag is the same on every platform except for Twitter. I'm not there no more. At Vegas World INC. If you follow me on Twitter and you're like, well, where are you? I'm on everything, but I'm mostly active on Blue Sky and Instagram, right? So if you hit me up there, you want to, chop it up, or you just want a link to some of my content when you're scrolling or whatever, those are the best places to go. So much more coming up, but I'm going to be quiet for now. Sometimes I say stuff too early, you know what I'm saying? And then you don't do it. The people say, yo, I thought what about that episode? Yeah, it didn't happen there. So until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.